Hardly any animated movies have made me laugh more than Despicable Me and Minions.
Boring!
But did you know that if you pause some scenes from these movies, you might laugh even more? That's because, despite being small and funny yellow creatures, the Minions also have a lot of mischief in their little polluted minds. One scene that makes this very clear happens at the end of the second Gru movie, at our favorite villain's wedding to Lucy. While we were all watching the Minions sing and the happy couple dance their wedding waltz, practically no one notices that in the corner of the scene, we can see one of Gru's minions with bad intentions looking at the butt of his boss's former suitor who was at the ceremony. And not just that, then he looks at another minion next to him and opens his mouth as if to bite the girl. And if you look closely, you'll notice that both the yellow creature next to him and the one behind start laughing at the mischief their naughty friend is doing. I watched this scene several times and never noticed this. Did you? Check out all the scenes from Minions and Despicable Me that you should never pause. So join this wave that's starting another Cinewave. But it's not just the Minions who make the funniest faces when we pause the movies at the right moment. In the same movie, we see Gru and Lucy meeting, and we can say it wasn't love at first sight because the villain simply tried to freeze his future wife. Only he didn't count on her being very well equipped to combat the villain, and at the end of this first meeting, she uses her electric lipstick to give the villain a tremendous shock. And if you pause the scene, you'll notice that while being electrocuted, Gru makes one of the funniest faces I've ever seen in my life. Besides being completely hunched like a hunchback, Gru goes completely cross-eyed with both eyes looking in completely different directions. After that, we see the Minions boss making the strangest and funniest faces I've ever seen, including even some 80s dance moves. This scene always makes me laugh a lot.
Lipstick taser!
The funniest part is that after being shocked, Gru completely passes out, so Lucy goes to the car to reverse as he was too heavy for her to drag. In the meantime, he gets up totally groggy, and the AVL agent ends up reversing over her future husband. And if you pause at the right moment, you'll see the villain's pained face as he hits the car's rear windshield. Surely this must have been the worst first date of a future couple in the history of the animated world.
I can't take it anymore!
Besides several movies, Gru's franchise and his Minions also have several animated shorts. In one of them, called Panic in the Mailroom, released the same year as Despicable Me 2, we see two Minions working on package verification for Gru, and at one point, one of them ends up getting smeared with the purple potion created by Dr. Nefario to make the Minions monstrous and indestructible. From that moment on, we see the little yellow creature start to transform and untransform several times, to the laughter and later despair of the other Minion. And if you pause in the middle of one of the transformations, you'll catch the exact moment when the little yellow creature is half monster and half normal Minion. At the end of the short, we see the purple Minion wanting to eat a box of kittens that simply appeared on the mail conveyor belt out of nowhere, while the other Minion tries to save the little animals. And we can see once again the Minion untransforming, and if you pause at the right moment, you'll see him looking completely different, with long wavy arms and a very funny face. While I feel sorry for the Minion who is transforming and returning to normal, I can't help but laugh at this part of the animation. And if you are a fan of Despicable Me and the Minions, prove it and comment below with #Gru in honor of the leader of the most beloved yellow creatures in animations. Now moving on to Despicable Me 3, this was the movie where we found out that Gru had a twin brother, Dru. But unlike the Minions' boss, the other brother had no vocation for crime, and the two end up arguing after retrieving Brat's crystal. And if you pause the movie at the right moment, you'll see Dru making a very funny face, as if he were sticking his tongue out at his brother while looking up, almost like a very funny, mocking face. In Minions 2, The Rise of Gru, we also find some scenes that if you pause at the right moment, you'll find very amusing. One of them happens when Gru and the Minions are at an arcade, and the little boss messes with the wires of one of the game tables, creating an anti-gravity field that makes Minion Bob start floating. And if you pause at the right moment, you'll see Bob's tongue sticking out of his mouth and slapping his face. Besides, the Minion has his eyes tightly closed as if he's suffering. We can see that both Gru and the little boy at the other end of the table find it very funny, and so do I. In the first Despicable Me movie, we can see another funny scene with the little yellow creatures. In fact, this is the first time Gru's Minions appear in the history of animations. We can see two Minions placing a pin in one of the structures of the villain's lair, and while one holds the pin, the other has a hammer in hand to hit it. Just at the exact moment they're about to do it, the boss appears and calls everyone for a meeting. They try to rush the process, and the Minion with the hammer ends up hitting the other poor fellow's head hard. The hit is so strong on the poor guy's head that his eyes go completely cross-eyed, and then he lets out a tremendous scream of pain. Good thing Minions are practically immortal, or he'd go straight to the graveyard. So never try this at home. You might not survive. We can say that Kyle is far from winning a canine beauty contest, but Grus Pet is definitely one of the funniest characters to see in the movies because he's so bizarre, looking like a mix between a dog and a piranha.
You're ugly, you're disgusting.
In the second movie of the franchise, just before Lucy and Gru officially meet, the villain opens the house door for the pet to pee outside. But when he starts, we see Gru picking him up and placing him in the neighbor's yard. And when the villain picks up the dog with his hands, he looks even weirder and funnier with his eyes even more bulging and his mouth slightly squashed. Before seeing this, Kyle scared me. Now, I find him quite funny. If you, like us, also enjoy cartoons and animated movies, don't waste time and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss the videos we post every day. Surely Gru and Lucy are one of my favorite couples in the world of animations, but it probably only worked out because Gru couldn't see Lucy's slow-motion expressions when they were in the AVL cupcake store. But since we aren't Gru, we can see in this part of the second movie that Lucy made one of the funniest faces in all the franchise movies, looking a lot like a cave woman at one point. It's true that Gru isn't the most handsome guy in the world, but I think if he had noticed Lucy's funny face, he might have run away at that very moment. In the first Minions movie, we saw how old they are, being in the world for millions of years. And the first evil being they serve is a huge T-Rex whom they end up killing by making him fall into a volcano. When this happens, 3 minions also end up falling off the cliff. And if you pause at the right moment, you'll see that one of them, just before hitting his face on one of the volcano rocks, makes a face of total despair, knowing that it will hurt a lot. After serving several evil bosses, the group of yellow creatures began serving none other than Count Dracula himself. The problem is that they ended up doing the same thing to the vampire as with the T-Rex, and they end up getting rid of the poor guy. When they bring a cake to celebrate the Lord of the Night's 357th birthday, sunlight comes in and turns Dracula into dust. And when he realizes that he's done for, the vampire makes a desperate face that if you pause, you'll see more clearly. Even being a Lord of the Night, I felt a little sorry for Dracula at that moment. I don't think I'd want to have minions as employees. It would be too dangerous. In the same movie, when the minions are many years in the future, we see Scarlet challenging her audience of villains to take her precious stone during the villain convention. The first poor guy who tries to do this gets a tremendous beating and ends up being thrown on the stage stairs and then trampled by the other villains who try to do the same. If we pause the scene at the right moment, we'll notice that one of the villains simply uses the mouth of the first candidate to face Scarlet as support to climb on stage. Tell me, had you ever noticed this when you watched the movie? I never did. Only when I watched it for the third time and put it in slow motion did I realize it. These were the scenes that if you don't like a good laugh, you should never pause. But if you paused here with us in the video, you undoubtedly had fun. And if you want to keep having fun, it's very simple. You just need to choose one of the 2 videos that are appearing on the screen and click. I've heard that the one on the right is really good. Check it out!